Welcome to History Hack. If you didn't know by now, we are the revolution. That means we're sharp, witty, lots of fun, but it also means that we're essentially the peasants in Les Mis huddled round a table in the corner of the bar with no money. If you enjoy the show, please do support us. We have a Patreon account by which you can donate a small monthly sum in appreciation of what you're hearing. Alternatively, we have Ko-fi, in which you can just do a one-off donation as a thank you if you particularly enjoy a certain episode. Either way, we massively appreciate all of your support. Hope you enjoy the show.
Hello, welcome to another episode of History Hack. We are here with part 2 talking about Dracula. And if you haven't listened to part 1 or have an idea of who our guests are, make sure you head back because I'm just not going to bother explaining it to you. You should have listened to part 1 in the first place. But we are going to kick off from exactly where we kind of left off, really. And we were talking about the Constantinople at this stage, weren't we, Gemma? I think. Am I right?
Yes, we were in the 1453 conquest fall. The terminology is debatable and it can be quite loaded, so I'm not going to touch that discussion. But yes, we were talking about Mehmed II's taking of Constantinople, which is at that point all that is left of the Byzantine Empire. And I think we were about to have highlight some of the importance in the military technology being used at that time.
And that's Victor's thing, isn't it? He's supposed to be talking about that.
Yeah, I think it was Victor's fantastic idea to talk about the canon and the canon creator. So over to you, my friend. Go.
All right. The reason Constantinople had survived for so many years, for more than 1,000 years, was that its land side walls, called the Theodosian walls, were extremely tall and thick. And for 1,000 years, they were able to prevent invaders from taking the city. So there were numerous attempts, very many attempts, until 1453, when something happened that enabled the new forces in the region, the Ottomans, to take the city. And that new event was a change in the technology of siege warfare through the development of a super gun by a Transylvanian engineer named Orban. In order for him to be able to build this gun, he had to overcome a lot of technical difficulties and challenges. But just to put it in perspective, the largest gun at that time was a gun called Mons Meg that was cast in Edinburgh. And for comparison, it had a barrel that was about 15 feet long, which is about 4.6 meters, and a diameter of 20 inches or 51 centimeters. By comparison, the cannon that Orban was able to cast had a barrel that was 27 feet long, 8.2 meters, and a diameter of 30 inches. That makes the bore of the cannon, of Orban cannon, 125% larger than Meg Mons. In consequence, whereas Meg Mons could shoot a stone ball of about 400 pounds or 180 kilograms, Orban was able to shoot 800 pounds, about 360 kilograms, and to take it about a mile in distance. When the cannon was cast in Edirne, the then capital of the Ottoman Empire on the European side, and when they tested this cannon, the population of town began to panic, and they are reporting that many windows were broken and there were miscarriages among the women. Now, some of these may have been apocryphal stories, but nonetheless, it was a serious event. Now, this cannon was cast in 1452, and it had to be transported a distance of about 140 miles to Constantinople, and that required a team of about 400 people and 60 oxen. The people had to take care of building new roads or repairing the old ones, enlarging them, building bridges, and then moving the cannon itself with pulleys and other artifacts. It took them several weeks to transport the cannon from Edirne to Constantinople. And when they began to use it in a siege in 1453, it was fired only every few hours. It took about 3 hours for the cannon to cool down, and it had to be cleaned and reloaded. So, in essence, there weren't that many 800-pound balls shot at the walls. But in addition to the material effect of the cannon, the psychological effect played a big role in the conquest of Constantinople. And then after about 53 years of siege, the city fell to Mehmet and subsequently a while later became Istanbul.
Wow, 53 years.
53 days.
Oh, 53 days. I misheard.
Yeah, because yeah, the year is 1453, so you can get a little.
Yeah, it was a
There's a lot
coincidence.
of 53s going around.
Yeah, right, a good
Is that a
coincidence.
special number, by the way?
I don't know. Clearly, it is for Mehmet. It's his lucky number.
Gemma, tell us a little bit about what's happening after the city falls.
Mehmet this is his thing. Constantinople has been the red apple. This is what he's wanted. This is what he has dreamed of. It's not going to be his last conquest by any means. He becomes known to us as the Conqueror. It is his first and his biggest. So what he essentially does is he's very into perpetuating the idea that he is now Caesar or Roman Emperor by right of conquest. His argument is that Constantinople was sort of the capital of the Roman Empire, and in taking it, he kind of takes on that role. And you see a lot of continuity of the sort of Roman, Eastern Roman, Byzantine, again, not Byzantine, is not going to have that debate, continuity that I don't have time to go into, but if you do sort of read around this transition era, it's quite fascinating. But so he takes on these titles. He is the Sultan of Rum. He, in the most immediate aftermath, the soldiers get 3 days in accordance with custom to pillage and loot as they were promised. And then after 3 days, Mehmet really begins to turn the city into his imperial capital. Now, they already have an imperial capital. You've already heard say, they were at Edirne, but he moves everything to Istanbul really pretty quickly, all things considered. And one of the key things is he wants to start minting coins with his new status and titles on. So the mint comes to Istanbul. We're not exactly sure about the logistics or time frame of when the mint moved from Edirne to Istanbul, but we can assume it would be pretty quickly based on how fast the coins come. And the other aspect of material culture where Mehmet was really putting his mark on the city was 2 large construction projects. The first one we would all know is Topkapı Palace, which would be the homes of the sultans until the mid-19th century. So until Dolmabahce Palace opened up in the 19th century. So conquest began about 6 years after Constantinople. It was called the New Palace then. And if you've never visited, if you're in Istanbul, I recommend you go. This would be the center of Ottoman administrative life and the royal family's main home base until the 19th century. It's really where everything would go on. So Mehmet builds this, and there is also a mosque named after him, Fatih Mosque, which is in the Fatih district of Istanbul. So that mosque was put up in the 1460s. It was damaged in an earthquake in the 18th century and rebuilt to a different design, but the point is the mosque still stands there. And mainly, my takeaway of how he's asserting his power is the titles he's using, he puts them on the buildings. There's calligraphy everywhere on these buildings, basically saying, you know, you are entering my territory. I am Mehmet. I am the Sultan. I am, you know, God's shadow on earth. They're listed everywhere. So it's really, really a big statement. He also turns the Church of Hagia Sophia becomes a mosque, but if you haven't seen the wonderful restoration work, he orders the angels are not, they're whitewashed over, they're covered, they're not destroyed. And actually, in recent years, restoration work has uncovered the old Byzantine paintings left there, so we're very lucky to still have that. And one more thing I want to mention is a famous portrait of Mehmet that you should see if you've done any research on him at all, or if you know anything about it. Was a portrait by Bellini, Gentile Bellini, the famous portrait painter. And this is striking because not only in its realism, which we don't traditionally see in Ottoman art, but also I think Mehmet is communicating to Western Europe and legitimizing himself to Western Europe, because if you look at the style of this portrait, it's very similar to the portraits of the Venetian doges in its composition. There's a lot of symbolism behind how many crowns are in the portrait, to how many lands he rules, and so on. So that's a very significant part of Mehmet representing his own power, not only within the city but also abroad as well. So he is very much, I'm here, I'm great, and learn my name because you're going to be hearing more about it. And he really, really is out to leave his mark. But through all of this time and all of these constructions, that, you know what, Victor, he's still got that pesky little Valachian thorn in his side. What's happening with Vlad? How does Vlad sort of exit the chat, as it were?
Well, after Constantinople, the first significant move that Mehmed makes is trying to take Belgrade. Belgrade being one of the most important fortresses on his way to Rome, so to speak, on the overland route to Rome. And he happens to be faced there by one of the, perhaps the best warrior of the time, John of Hunyadi, or John Hunyadi, who was at that time, I believe, regent of Hungary. And after a protracted siege of several weeks, Mehmed gave up and went home. And that victory at Belgrade is celebrated with the tolling of the churches at noon throughout the world to this day. All right. Unfortunately, days after the end of the battle, Hunyadi died of the plague and left a big vacuum there in the Christendom for any significant warrior or leader. Well, in 1456, Vlad, known as Dracula as well, manages to ascend or accede to the throne of his father, Vlad Dracul, who had died assassinated in 1447. And after he settles some accounts with the boyars who had killed his father and his brother, consolidates his power, and for the next 6 years, he prepares for what he knows will be an inevitable conflict with Mehmet. And in not a small measure, Vlad caused that conflict to accelerate by refusing to pay tribute.
Yeah,
Actually,
he does.
He did not directly refuse, but he always temporized about it, like, oh, excuse me, I don't have enough money this month, and could you give me a little more time, and so forth. But then, in 1461, Vlad decided, for his own reasons, I believe, to provoke the actual invasion by Mehmet. My suspicion, and I treat this in my novels and the way I see it, is that he didn't believe Mehmet was ready yet. He believed that Mehmet wanted to make his incursion to Rome on the 10th anniversary of the fall of Constantinople, which would have been 1463.
Mm-hmm.
And he thought, if I force his hand, he'll come half prepared, and perhaps I can deal with him. And in view of that event, he decided to cross the Danube that was frozen in 1461, winters, let's say December 1461. Danube was frozen. He crossed over to the southern bank and destroyed about 7 of Mehmet's most important fortresses there, as well as stores of grain and all sorts of supplies that had been laid there for the future campaign. Well, needless to say, Mehmet would not take this sitting down. And then in the summer of 1462, he put together a very creditable army of about 120,000 people and about another 100,000 perhaps of logistic personnel, and crossed the Danube and went after Vlad. Vlad, unfortunately, he had been promised money by Pope Pius II to face the Turks, and with which he would have built a more credible army. But that money was pocketed by King Matthias of Hungary, son of John Hunyadi. And without that money, Vlad was left to deal with Mehmet only with his own people. Well, nonetheless, he conducted a very successful guerrilla warfare, which was relatively new in that area at the time, and managed to harass Mehmet until the point where the poor man gave up. And the last image that Mehmet had of Wallachia was reputedly a forest of about 30,000 impaled people surrounding the capital of Wallachia, the town of Târgoviște.
I think we're not 100% sure on that figure, though, give or take, shall we
Of
say?
course, all of the figures in this history are grossly exaggerated by either party, but it's believed that there were thousands, which makes
that's what they put about anyway to make it sound more terrifying.
It makes it an impressive sight. Well, when Mehmet saw this, he just got completely discouraged and decided to turn around and go back. However, at the same time, Vlad, who should have now have his power consolidated there, was betrayed by some of his people, by his boyars, and more importantly, by his enemies across the mountains in Kronstadt, which is today Brasov. These were Saxons of Transylvania with whom he had dealt very harshly in previous years. And they manufactured some letters in Latin, in poorly written Latin, mind you, in which it appeared that Vlad was begging Mehmet for forgiveness and promising allegiance and all of that. It was all BS, but it was good enough for King Matthias to say, well, let's look into this issue. And he had Vlad arrested, taken to Buda, and put on trial. Well, if he had proven that there was treason, he could have easily killed him. But apparently he couldn't prove it. There were testimony in favor of Vlad. But just to be on the safe side, he kept Vlad in prison for something between 10 and 14 years. Again, the figures are not certain.
And this is the time when he marries a Hungarian princess, I believe. Tell me I'm correct. Yes.
The very end. So for about 10 to 12, 14 years, he's kept in prison. One of the places is a mountaintop fortress called Visegrad on the Danube, just north of Budapest. Budapest didn't exist at that time. And he spent most of the time there. At the bottom of that mountain was the summer residence of King Matthias, so you could see why he wanted to keep him under close. It is assumed that that is the time when his portrait was painted, the portrait that is now, well, the portrait that is at the Ambras Castle in Innsbruck, the only one that we have of him,
Yeah.
made a copy of that original portrait, but apparently he's set for a painting in those years of imprisonment. Well, in the meantime, Mehmed, taking advantage of Vlad's departure, appointed his brother, Radu the Handsome, as voivode, or practically king of Wallachia. And one of the reasons he did that, well, two reasons perhaps. One is that Radu had converted to Islam, that is, again, not proven but strongly believed.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one is that the two of them had a romantic liaison.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, Mehmed trusted him. And I think that Radu never really let him down, because for the next 12 years, I think, he ruled Wallachia, and apparently with sufficient competency. However, in 1475, Radu dies under mysterious circumstances, and now Mehmed has to come back and figure out who to put on charge there, because the situation became unstable very quickly. At the same time, then, King Matthew says, wait a minute, these Turks are raising their heads again, or the Ottomans, and who could face them? I have nobody except Vlad, Dracula, who is under my care here. So to convince Vlad to take up the arms again after being kept away for 12 years or 14, he gave him one of his, I guess, a niece in marriage.
Mm-hmm.
The only problem is, and he asked him to convert to Catholicism because the Hungarians were Catholics. Well, this didn't go very well with the Romanians, and
No.
they have led to his reputed assassination. But again, that's not a proven fact. But he then was given an army and went back and met Mehmed for the last time in 1476 to 77, a winter war, just outside present-day Bucharest, and apparently defeated Mehmed again. And the legend is that he was so happy that he had beaten Mehmed that he rode his horse on the top of a hill to take a view over the battlefield, and that's where he was surrounded by treasonous boyars who assassinated him. Well, it says that he was. Can we go on to the burial business?
Yeah, Vlad's death and debased, because just to check, he's decapitated in this battle, isn't he? He's
Hey, what?
Isn't that how he died? Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's how he died.
Well,
hold on. We've got nobody pre-warned me there's going to be decapitation.
Well, okay, it's not clear that he was, but subsequent, after he died, they took off his head, they say. So that decapitation post-mortem is reputed. And
Okay,
Mehmed,
yeah.
it is claimed that Mehmed took his head and put it in a jar of honey as a preservative and paraded it through the empire. Well,
lovely.
There isn't much evidence about that. And furthermore, since it's been reported then he was then secretly buried in the island of Snagov, in the church of Snagov outside of Bucharest, with or without the head, he's supposed to have been buried there. So now we have some controversy here about.
Oh yeah, this is a big deal.
Can
The
I just throw
discussions about.
something in? So there's always controversy because you've got the history is written by the victors, as we very well know. So this is why these kind of rumors are all the way around. Oh, he chopped off his head, he put it in honey, and he paraded it around. Because look what we did. Look how amazing we are. We are the victors. And at the end of the day, we don't truly know the truth, and I don't think we ever will.
Yeah, Mehmed couldn't very well go home empty-handed. There was a lot of reputation at stake there, so he could easily take a head and put it in a jar. Who would be able to prove? I mean, all Romanians look the same anyway. So big black mustache.
I'm not touching that.
That's
I
a
can
bit
say
like saying.
as a Romanian, I can afford to.
Yeah, I'm not passing comment on that statement.
As a young man, I used to have a big mustache, and on people looking at pictures says I look like Pablo Escobar.
It's true. I've seen the pictures of Victor as a young man. It's true.
Oh no!
So it is very easy for Mehmed to have taken anybody's head. There is a controversy that we're not going to go into this time, but a similar thing happened at the Battle of Varna when the then king of Hungary was killed, and they said his head was taken and put on a stake and all of that, and yet for decades later he was reputed to live in Portugal or in the Azores and so forth. There's lots of legends about it. But coming back to Vlad, his story gets complicated after he disappears. I refrain from saying he died because eventually presumably he died eventually. Although those who believe that he's a vampire know he didn't die, but we'll keep that as a in between stage here. However, what happened is that in the early 20th century, archaeologists opened his tomb in Snagov and did not find him there. They found, I think, horse bones in some kind of a regal regalia. So that somebody important was buried there in Snagov, in the island of Snagov, but the bones were not human. So that, of course, raises a lot of other suspicions. And then the latest theory, can we go into that, Gemma?
Yeah, I mean, it gets a bit Da Vinci Code, the debates around Vlad and like where is his body and things like that. But yes, we'll bring you the most up to date information we have. Take it, go right ahead. This is hilarious. Go right ahead.
Sometimes in around 2000, I've even asked ChatGPT if that was true, and they said I cannot tell for sure.
No one knows.
In 2003, a team of Estonian historians did some research in Naples at the Church of Santa Maria Novella, and there they came upon two things: one, an inscription on the wall, and the other one, a bas relief of a sarcophagus. It looked like the sarcophagus may have been embedded in the wall, and just the front panel was visible. Well, on this front panel, they noticed figurines of dragons that did not were not congruent with the art of southern Italy, but they were very similar to what they had seen in Wallachia and in Transylvania. So therefore, they say, "Wow, who is this?" They did a little more research, and they came upon information. Well, a lot of other people got into this business now. A lot of Italian historians and amateurs and sleuths and so forth. And the upshot of it is that now they say that his daughter, Vlad's daughter, somehow found a way to Naples and married one of the offshoots of the royal family there. And therefore, it's conceivable that she brought her father there, who was wounded and getting old, in his late 40s, mind you. But at that time, that was oldish. And brought him there, and therefore it's very conceivable that he was buried there. I will solve that mystery in volume 9 of my book, so you'll have to wait for that to be written.
Yeah, it's a bit of a question.
Can anyone answer the question?
Well, probably not definitively. I say we're gonna have Victor's take on it in his book, but I mean, for my money, it would be really nice to believe that Vlad, went, survived and went on and lived a while, but had he done that, I can't see him, old or not by the standards of the time, not coming back and not giving it a go. I think he would want to go down swinging. That's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, I will have to explain why he remained incognito, right? Because
it doesn't gel with his character for me. That's all.
Perhaps it's a love story. Hey, you don't know. Maybe he had enough. Something like this happened. Something similar happened to Murat II. He got tired of war after 20 years.
He did.
He just the scepter says, "I'm done. I want to go, like you said, on top of the mountain and
meditate with Sufis." Yeah.
Poets and drink wine. By the way, he was a good drinker. So why not Vlad saying, after being in prison for 14 years, and then coming back and being attacked by all people, you know what? Screw this thing. I'm going to go and find my woman and settle down in Naples and drink wine and so on. And we'll see. I have to figure out.
I mean, that sounds like a pretty good life. Does anyone want to offer me that kind of life?
It
Yeah,
goes
I'll take two of what he's having, you know?
like Gemma says, it goes against the type because you would expect him to go down swinging. But if we look at his psychology, being put away for 14 years, that's something to your mind. Not in terms of losing your nerve, but in terms of saying, who am I doing this for? If you guys treat me like this, because they're all Christians. He's
Yeah, I'm
fighting for
trying to help you
Christendom.
people, and this is the
I'm
thanks I
trying to
get.
help you, and you do this to me. Well, you know what? I got some words for you. So, but they are Italian. It's mafangu. So that's a possibility.
Right, guys, let's talk a little bit about pop culture because this is such a hot topic. I mean, my God, vampires are at one stage were such a in thing to be writing about it, to be seeing it on TV. I mean, how many TV programs have we got that are about vampires? How many TV programs have we got about Dracula in itself? How many films have we got? How many books, apart from obviously Victor's books? But
and wine bottles.
And
Oh, yeah,
exactly, and wine bowls. So let's talk a little bit about what is the truth? How far should we go with this truth, and where are we with it now?
I've actually done some work on this because I like studying on history and popular culture. So usually I would write conference papers and things about Victor's books. I'm gonna leave that for him to share with you because he's literally their creator. But I have watched a lot of terrible Dracula films in the name of doing this research. I watch them so you guys don't have to. You're welcome. Because a lot of them are quite terrible, but some of them I actually enjoyed. And there is one now. There's two movies called Dark Prince. One of them's more historical and much better. The other one, the other one just has some sort of Fabio wannabe in like pale makeup being Dracula. Don't watch that one. It's not good. But I think in very recent years, I mean in English language, because obviously Dracula's always been known as the Prince in Romania, I'm seeing more in sort of Anglophone media, novels and movies about the historical Vlad rather than just using his name and tacking it on a vampire. Now there are so many studies about Bram Stoker's novel and where he did or did not take influence from the real Vlad, and I would recommend anyone interested in that in particular to get Elizabeth Miller's book Dracula Sense and Nonsense, because that's she does a really comprehensive dissection in there. In terms of, well, there are some little goodies in the history that kind of like lend itself to folklore, and this is a useful fact for your pub quiz. You remember Victor's mentioning how he marries the Catholic princess, converts to Catholicism, and that is not popular in Orthodox Romania. There was a theory, a contemporary superstition at the time, that if you died excommunicated, you were at risk of coming back as a vampire. Technically, you can argue Vlad had that when he would have been excommunicated from the Orthodox Church. So that's just an interesting little tidbit there. But yes, there is definitely less vampire, more voivode, although there are pop culture that like to kind of blend the two, that the historical Vlad did come back, and I'm guilty of this in my favourite novel, The Historian by Elizabeth Kostova. He is the real Wallachian prince, but he comes back, but he's more about wanting scholars to perpetuate the truth about him rather than anything else. So, and if you haven't read The Historian, stop everything you're doing with your life and go and read it right now. And then you have C.C. Humphrey's book, which is called Vlad the Last Confession. Now, this is a novel, and it uses a rather interesting framing device of confession being taken from three characters, and they are Dracula's mistress, Dracula's personal priest, and Dracula's sort of best friend, comrade in arms. And I'm not going to spoil the twist for you if you haven't read it, but this is an instance where, you know, everyone thinks Vlad has died, but it's you don't really find out till the end of the book. But yes, there's more vampire movies and sort of TV shows than you could shake a stick at, and it's interesting when you see how vampires on screen develop, because originally they're Nosferatu, right? They're shroud eaters. They're, they look quite monstrous. Then sort of Stoker's novel comes and turns Dracula into this kind of urbane, very sort of charming, very sexy Victorian gentleman who's kind of respectable and charismatic on the outside, but there's that monster inside, and that sort of ties into all the gothic culture of the day. But I mean, I haven't even watched half of the vampire things out there, and I've been watching vampire stuff since I was a kid because I was that teenager. But just know that just because it has the name Dracula on it, I think vampire Dracula and historical Dracula are separate. Their stories can diverge sometimes, and I think there's no better
Sometimes
sort of
they overlap. Sometimes they overlap.
Sometimes they overlap on the Venn diagram, but I think there could be no better sort of explanation of the fact that vampirism's always going to have a place in discussions about Dracula. They're just inextricably linked at this point. And for my money, if something like that gets someone interested enough to research the name and find out the history of Vlad III, I'm okay with it. And also because I have interests in folklore, I'm okay with sort of the vampire mythology, just as long as we do maintain that understanding. And there are probably my two favorite journal articles in Dracula studies, and I'll wrap up my discussion of pop culture with this, were the first two editions of the Dracula Studies Journal. And Elizabeth Miller, fantastic Dracula literature scholar, wrote a paper called Filing for Divorce, Count Dracula versus Vlad the Impaler. And then, so that was in issue 1 of the journal. And in issue 2, Dracula historian Raymond McNally, who was one of the guys who really brought Dracula history into the Anglophone world, he wrote a response to Professor Miller called Separation Granted, Divorce Denied, Annulment Unlikely, in which he's basically going, look, we know literature Dracula and history Dracula are not the same, but the names are going to stick. They're always going to share this name. But I do recommend looking up those two articles. They are available open access online, and they are a pretty good read. But in terms of the historical Vlad, Victor is the author of the most modern definitive work on that. So I'm gonna let Victor speak to that. Let's hear about your novels, Victor.
All right. Well, my take on Vlad was based on my understanding of his being a national hero and having contributed to defending Europe, not only his country, Wallachia, which is part of Romania today, but most of Central and Central Europe for sure, against being invaded by the Ottoman Turks or the Muslims, the Ottomans. So, having learned about him, having grown up with him as being such a national hero, when I discovered many years later that he's known to the world as a vampire, I had a very negative reaction to that. I was deeply offended, and I said to myself that aren't there some books that talk about the real Dracula? This being 1970, the answer was no. There was absolutely nothing, neither in popular culture, at least outside Romania. I'm speaking outside Romania, because my epiphany came in Chicago. There were no books about him, fiction or nonfiction, outside Romania. So I said, since I'm not a historian, I couldn't write the nonfiction book, but I said I could possibly in the future write a novel. And I did take a long time to get prepared and learn everything that I needed to learn about that. And finally, I started to write this novel, which presently has 4 volumes available. And I intended to have it 9 volumes based on my calculation of the events that I have yet to cover. Now, my approach to dealing with Vlad is slightly different from the one that you will see in similar novels in Romania. There's the Romanian authors who write very good books about him. They take a much more openly patriotic approach because why not? I mean, that's I would do the same if I were writing in Romania. But my thinking was that for the foreign audience or for foreign readership, people who don't know anything about Vlad to start with, becoming overly, brave-heartish about it would turn them off. So I decided to internationalize him to a large extent, and by that I provided him a larger theater of operation. And so his activities will show up in Italy, Hungary, Austria, of course, Transylvania, Wallachia, and so forth. And the first four books culminate with the Battle of Varna, one of the most important battles of that time, in which Mehmet's father confronted Can Hunyadi and others, of course. And going beyond that, volume 5 and 6 will deal with the approach of the fall of Constantinople. 6 and 7 will deal with Vlad taking power in Wallachia and finally fighting it off with Mehmet. And then volume 9, maybe, we don't know yet, could take us all the way to southern Italy. So to the Western reader or the non-Romanian reader, I present a more, like I said, urbane international character. The issues that are dealt with in the book are European issues, not Wallachian issues exclusively. And because of this, I have been very successful in attracting a large readership of people who did not know anything either about Vlad or the geography of the place or all the conflicts of the 15th century. And now I hear from them that they learn more history reading my book than reading history books, and that's because they learn it subliminally. I want to emphasize that my books are not lectures in history. They are supposed to be fun, adventure, love stories, and intrigues, and so forth. But underneath the surface, there is a ton of factual information that will help a reader become a lot more oriented about things happening in the 15th century in Central Europe and Middle East.
I think also we were having this discussion, I think a while ago now. I was reading it, and because you're sort of entertaining but also educating this sort of Western audience, you changed the name of Vlad's big brother. And when I picked up the first book, I was going, who the heck is this? Yeah, I'm going, who the heck is this? Where's my favorite Dracula prince? Because Mircha's my favorite. I'm going, where is he? Why is he called Marcus? What's happening?
When I started to write, I reflected upon the fact that it is difficult for a non-Romanian reader to pronounce and remember Romanian names. That's one challenge. The second one is that, as in many of those Eastern European cultures, names are repeated. So you will have Mircea the Elder, who is the grandfather of Vlad's grandfather. Then you have Mircea the brother. And between not knowing how to pronounce it and not remembering what it looks like, the reader is at a loss. So I said, well, what would it be if I translated those names into names that have wider circulation, usually biblical names? So I named the grandfather Justus and the brother Marcus. Now, in order, I'm sure this will offend some of Romanian purists, but not one of my readers have, other than Gemma, have protested to this indignity. And to help, however, the serious reader to get oriented among the real characters, I have a glossary of terms at the end of every book where the names are presented as in the book in alphabetical orders, and then their real name, including their pronunciation. So if you want to be thorough about this, you can really be. But in the meantime, if you just want to have fun, Marcus and Justice and others like that will.
I mean, it wasn't really a protest. I was just confused. I was like, where is he? Where's my favorite prince? But I think, I mean, we've talked about how you've had like a very positive reception, at least your Western readers, but your book's not currently available in Romanian to Romanian
They-
readers. We were talking
They are
about
not.
this, weren't we?
They are becoming available, but not translated. So that's the latest development. I have now been asked by several libraries, both university and municipal and regional libraries, to make my books available for their catalog. And it looks like I will end up having them in just about all the universities and the large libraries in the country.
I mean, that's really exciting.
It is, and they have already received several letters of acknowledgement and thanks from them. And at one of the presentations, when books were presented to one of the famous libraries outside Bucharest, people in the audience says, "Well, why aren't they in Romanian? Why aren't they translated?" So my thinking is that if, first of all, the translation is a beastly difficult thing, especially for a book in 9 volumes. So I'm not ready to tackle that. But while I'm writing and getting ready to translate them, it'd be nice to have them planted throughout the country so that the younger generations who do read English, because English wasn't very popular when I grew up there, but now the young people, especially all involved in IT and so forth, they all speak English. So if they can read the English, then the word gets around, and when we finally translate the books, they will have a ready-made readership there. But they are even saying that the book will be accepted by the Romanian Academy Library, which is it's stupendous. I mean, I am shocked. I can't believe it, but that's how
I remember you telling me about that. You were like, "This is a huge deal." It was.
I still can't believe it because it's too big to. It's like the Académie Française is way too high. I don't feel worthy of that, but if they'll do it, well, I'll take it. My alma mater was the first to accept the books, and they asked for 5 copies so they could 10 copies of each volume, so they could distribute them to the various colleges like the philology, the English literature, so forth. So that was a big thing, and then afterwards, everybody's starting to ask for them.
Yeah, you're becoming a trend. Well, I am really happy about that actually. But yeah, that's where we are. That's Victor's book. But History Hack listeners, you should be able to pick up Victor's books from our shop, I believe. Alina, the all-seeing, the all-powerful, the omnipotent goddess of History Hack, will be able to tell us about that.
Basically, Victor, if you can just remind our listeners the name of your book, and then we will get that into our shop.
So the book is Dracula Chronicles, Volume 1, Son of the Dragon, Volume 2, Empire of the Crescent Moon, Volume 3, The House of War, Volume 4, Death of Kings, Volume 5, to be written next year, is called Zara, and it has to do with Vlad's first real love.
Amazing. Thank you so much for both of you coming on. And we will get that in our bookshop. So you get a slice of the pie, we get a slice of the pie, and that shop that's named after a river in South America will not get a massive slice of the pie or that rocket that they're apparently sending into space. Yes. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Pleasure, Alina. Thank you for having us. Bye-bye.
Thank you for having us.
Our incredible guests give us 45 minutes of their time to join us and talk about their work or their new book. This is just a small taster. As a result, we have launched our very own bookshop on bookshop.org, where you can find our guests' latest books, you can support them, and you can support us on History Hack. 10% of every sale via our bookshop supports the podcast and allows us to keep going and bring you more top-of-the-line guests. You can find our bookshop at bookshop.org/shop/historyhack, or search for us in the shop section. Thank you so much for your continued support. We really appreciate our listeners and supporters. So make sure you get down to the bookshop and grab yourselves a new book.